I kind of turn the, oh no, we're going to get replaced mindset on its head and say, replace me. How can I be replaced?
Welcome back to CZ and Friends, where we talk with legal leaders, technologists, and operators shaping how modern companies work. I'm your host, Cecilia Zanidi. Today's guest is Jimmy Toy, Chief Legal Officer at Articore Group. Articore owns Redbubble and TeePublic, two of the biggest online marketplaces for independent artists in the world. 70 million plus user-generated images on those platforms. Jimmy is the lawyer. Jimmy and his team are the lawyers responsible for all of it. Jimmy's been using AI and ML in his legal work for over 10 years before modern LLMs, which is a small group, self included. Jimmy has some takes on where legal is going, where legal is getting AI wrong, where legal is getting AI right. And it's going to be a potentially uncomfortable conversation for some of you, depending on where you sit on the copyright spectrum. But it'll be good uncomfortable. So let's get into it. Jimmy, welcome to the show.
Hi, Julia. Thanks for having me. Thrilled to join, talk about my experiences.
Awesome. Let's start with something you wrote to us before this episode that has really caught my fancy. So you said the best lawyers 5 years from now aren't going to be using AI to work faster. Instead, they're going to be using AI to not do legal work at all. And lawyers and the teams that they lead will shift from authoring individual outputs to just reviewing them and being architects. That's consistent with what I see. It's what we see on the software engineering side. My co-founder recently said, hey, I don't write code anymore. I just oversee it. Is that where legal is going? And unpack that for us.
Yeah, I definitely think so, because I think software engineering has really led this sort of a transformation within their industry, and lawyers in the legal industry, I think we need to head there too. But I think we have a very unique resistance to that sort of a transformation because we are just because of the way we're trained and the way that we think. But yes, I think we'll either have to change or we'll be left behind. I think being replaced is the fear of everyone, but I think we need to embrace that and figure out how we can get replaced in the right way.
You mentioned a unique fear that lawyers have, and I want to push on that. I'm not sure it's unique, but what do you think makes your lawyers uniquely averse to AI if they are?
I can speak for myself. I think in a lot of ways I represent a typical lawyer because I want to have flawless judgment and I want to work hard and show that I'm spending a lot of time working on this output. I mean, maybe not if you're at a firm, maybe not too much, not too little, just the right amount. And then you really become risk averse. And, you have this notion that exercising your independent judgment is key, and that judgment needs to be flawless, and you need to put in the time and effort of backing it up. But with these new tools that we have, it's really changing that, because it's not, I think you still need to exercise your independent judgment and you still need to be right most of the time, but things are moving so fast and you can rely on AI, I think, to fill in some of those repetitive parts of what we do, like information gathering. Just you can rely on it for that and then focus on maybe the higher level judgment. But I think it's hard to let go because as a lawyer, you feel like you're responsible for everything, every output, every response. I think it does make it harder to embrace a new tool that is new and risky and uncertain, but has such potential, I think, to transform the way we do our work.
You said part of that aversion of that feeling of responsibility is trained. How? Like, is it just literally going to law school? Is it we've been burned too many times? Like, I want to get into like the psychology a little bit because I think it's a powerful concept. If you want to move past it, is like, okay, understand why it's the case.
Yeah. Well, I think a great example is the billable hour. I think I'm speaking not only to in-house lawyers, which I have been for most of my legal career, uh, but also those at firms, because when you look at the billable hour, take this as an example. What if you spent 1,000 hours doing something and you had this really great work product, and the 1,000 hours you spent on it was like a big deal. It was great. It was the right amount of time. You didn't spend too much time, too little time. So let's just compress that and say, what if you, instead of spending that 1,000 hours achieving that same output, you could have spent 5 hours or even 0 hours? I think in the end, you aren't measured by, the amount of hours that you spent on it. You're measured by the output and how correct it was and how timely it was and the way you communicated it. But it's hard to separate that from the billable hour, because how do you just give a client a bill that is 90% less hours than you normally would have spent on that task?
And so you made the transition in-house, you said relatively early in your career. What is different about that instead of in-house, if at all? Because I think for me, like, I agree with you that there's this like work ethic, kind of pride of authorship of like, we've been through law school, if you clerked, like whatever it is that you did, you build a ton of hours at the firm. It's like this like kind of dossier that you have where you're like, yes, I've done all those things and most people haven't, and we're this rarefied breed. But in-house, I feel like I shed that like just the pure hours based pride. Did you?
Yeah, for sure. Valued more on the timeliness of my advice and the work product documents I produce, much more so than, yeah, the amount of time I spent on it. I think there is one aspect of this that applies to in-house, probably more so than firms. So I think if you're a lawyer at a firm, you got this billable hours thing, and how do you fit AI tools into that? But if you're in-house, you want to build the trust with your fellow executives and cross-functionally across teams. You want to show that you're the person that they can come to that has the answers. How do you deal with AI in the middle of that? Do you tell them I used AI for this? Are you proud of that, or do you not make it very prominent in the response that you're giving to them? So I think that there is a little bit of a conflict there, because when I'm answering a question, I want to feel like this is my judgment. You can only come to me. But actually, they could have gone to the the LLM and asked, and probably gotten 80% of the answer that I gave them.
So what lives in that 20%? Any good stories? I mean, you've been using AI for a long time, different platforms. And what are the things, what does legal look like going forward?
So I think that LLMs will have the most powerful transformative effects on the legal profession if we try to not just do things faster, but try to do things totally differently. And I think the differently, that's pretty generic, broad thing to say, but I think one way lawyers can really look at it and apply this new awesome tool in a way that is going to have a real positive effect on like their business that they're advising, and the outcomes that they drive, is just thinking about what you don't have to do. I kind of had this, I kind of turned the, oh no, we're going to get replaced mindset on its head and say, replace me. How can I be replaced? And what are things I don't like to do? Things that the LLM could do, or something that we can use the AI tool to empower someone else to do. That could be somebody on your own legal team. It could be a paralegal. It could be a more junior lawyer. It could also just be somebody on the people and culture team, just like interacting with, say, a legal chatbot or something. And I think the way you get there is by identifying what you do repeatedly, what you don't want to do, what somebody else or some tool can do, and then kind of separating those things out and then trying to build a system around it. The system can be something that's, involves a lot of the different tools and communications tools and LLM tools that you have at your disposal, say as an in-house lawyer, and then yeah, building workflows, building policies, and escalation. Like, how are things escalated? Measuring the effectiveness of it, and then capturing all of that, and then iterating and continuously improving that system.
So let's bring it to your companies. Redbubble and TeePublic are marketplaces. Artists upload designs, customers buy them on products. 70 million images. That's bigger than almost any marketplace. And so you create this platform for creative work. And basically, your legal exposure ends up being relatively high, right? So obviously you have DMCA, but you're printing t-shirts, you're printing all kinds of things where if your users upload things that are have the IP issues, you've got to not only police it, but you've got to have the consequences around that. So curious, like on copyright. So, are you a copyright maximalist? And how does that view, or how does the company's view on copyright show up for your team? And then we'll talk about AI within that. But first, let's start there.
Yeah. Uh, so little background on Articore Group is that we own 3 digital platforms. 2 of them are marketplaces. One's a creator storefront called Dashery that we newly launched. We also announced recently that we are acquiring an Indian print-on-demand marketplace for the Indian market, and so that'll make 4 digital platforms that we have. All of them are user-generated content catered to creators of graphic content that are trying to sell products like t-shirts and stickers and merch, with their brand or their art on it. And then because I'm a lawyer, I have to clarify one thing. We actually don't print anything, Cecilia.
When we used to talk about IP, it's like, so I used to work on Amazon Alexa, and this is public, but the name for the Echo device was changed from Dash to Echo so late they had already printed the boxes. And so literally tossed the boxes, shipped Echo in a just like literally a cardboard box. And it was brilliant because the users were like, "Wow, this is so stealth, this is incredible, like, secretive, invite-only thing," but it turned out it was just that it was too late to print the boxes. So, it's true that IP is harder when you're dealing with physical goods. So, do you use, like, a third-party printer, or how do you go from being a marketplace to
So we have different participants in the marketplace. We have the creators who are selling the products and uploading the content and creating their art, their customers who purchase from them, and then third-party fulfillers. They're usually mom and pop printers who are located close to markets all around the country, around the globe, because all of our marketplaces are global, and so they're a huge community of fulfillers that participate on our marketplace, and they're the ones that do the printing. They aren't our employees. We don't own the equipment. They're just participants, fellow users.
Interesting. Okay, yeah. So I dabble in photography. My mom has done a Shutterfly calendar for every year for however long, and um, I did notice recently I went to go print something at Walgreens, and it did have a copyright, an explicit opt-in copyright, said I own these images, etc. So is that the legal framework you're using? And I'm a former IP lawyer, so relatively deep on this, have pretty big views on OpenAI and copyright, which we'll talk about. But what's the how do you all do it?
Yeah. And so that's a very standard way to kind of build compliance with the law, when you're on a when you run a user generated content platform. So we have tens of thousands of uploads a day to our platforms. You can't possibly monitor it all. So yeah, you have to rely on people that are uploading that and selling their products to attest that to represent that they own the IP and that they aren't infringing anyone's rights. They're complying with the user agreement. But yeah, it's a huge area of risk for any platform, whether you're social media or you're more like graphic art platform hosting, that sort of thing, or all the way to being like an e-commerce marketplace that has its own specific risks. And I never did litigation when I was at a firm. Joined Redbubble to become a generalist and do corporate law. Redbubble had never been sued at that time, and it was called Redbubble before Articore. So when we started acquiring companies, we changed our name to Articore Group, became a group of companies. Now that I've within 6 months or so of joining, we were sued, and then we now fast forward almost 12 years that I've been here. I think we've had maybe 40 or 50 IP cases around the world. And
Wow.
and I've been the one kind of leading the
You became
management.
a litigator, what it sounds like.
I did, yeah. Although I don't know anything about filing or formatting court documents, that's all totally foreign to me. But yeah, like the strategic side of it, the reviewing briefs and doing a lot of e-discovery, all of that, I had to learn.
Does any one case stand out that you're most proud of?
I like to say we win most of them. but we don't win them all. And I think that's actually very important observation for risk management. I think if we won all of them hand down, knocked it out of the ballpark, we might be managing risk with too heavy a hand. But I think the ones I'm most proud of, so I think one in Australia I'm very proud of. Hell's Angels sued us for trademark infringements. I like to say I testified against the Hells Angels in federal court, but it was a trademark suit. Like somebody had uploaded their logos, and and rightfully so. They're very protective of who can wear a jacket or a vest or a t-shirt with their logo on it. Would try our best to really keep that stuff from coming on the site, and very little of it did. But there would be a couple of things that would get through our screens. And Australia didn't have a safe harbor law to protect platforms around for uploading of trademark content. So they had one for copyright, similar to the DMCA in the United States, but there really wasn't any settled law around what to do if somebody uploads a trademark that infringes someone's rights. And there's nothing to protect the platform. So we actually lost our first round, and then, but this case went on 10 years, and then we just in the last couple of years won on appeal. And I'm very proud of it because it actually created law in Australia. Yeah, similar to what the United States has, where if we modeled around just notice and takedown, and how what sort of responsibility does a platform have for this user-generated content. And so now it very much mirrors what a lot of other countries around the world, whether you're talking about EU, India, United States. And so, but yeah, it was our cases that helped to bring that about, which helped all platforms operating in Australia.
Wow. So put us in the room, let's say 7 years in or whatever when you're deciding whether to appeal. What are you presenting to the team to make that decision?
A lot of balancing. So of course you weigh the costs, likelihood of winning, disruption to the business. As the lawyer managing these cases, you want to appeal and you want to win. If you don't think it's the right outcome, but you have to kind of take the greater business into consideration. In the case of this one, it was, it really wasn't, there wasn't much of I think this is true of a lot of appeals. If you lose, there's really not much downside to appealing, and you can, yeah, I think maybe you could use it as leverage to force a settlement, or I think there's a lot of different ways to look at it. And usually on balance, it's for an important case, it usually makes sense to appeal. And so it's kind of our default.
Yeah. So back to the kind of AI theme, is it, I have this, well, I would say that being a litigator at a law firm, which I was, Morrison Forster, and then as, in-house lawyer, and then now as a CEO, it does change my tolerance for it. So I got to say, 7 years into a 10-year litigation, I'm not sure how receptive I would be, but I guess in that framework, like back to our question about AI, could AI have queued it up as you did? Because you kind of said, okay, here's the balancing, here's the whatever, and you're saying, okay, replace it. Like, is that the kind of decision, like that most crucial decision? We had a litigator on the show a bit ago, Michael Jacobs, who was the former chair of Morrison Forster, and he said deciding to bring a litigation is like deciding to open up a business unit, was how much he thought that that was a decision, because it really was. It has to be managed, it has to be staffed, it has to be paid for, and it has to be have the strategic decisions that you described. But you're a defendant, right? So a little bit different, but curious if you would agree with him that really is fundamentally a business judgment, and even if it is, how that interacts with AI that you described of making yourself obsolete.
First of all, we just have an amazing in-house team. All of us, I would say that we became a crack litigation in-house team over the last 10 years, across so many jurisdictions, so many countries, Europe, Asia, United States, Australia, and then in the external counsel that we use have been excellent as well across all our cases and jurisdictions. And then I think that it's so time consuming, especially the e-discovery part. We've done class actions. When things get into the class action area, it can become very, very time consuming and disruptive for the business. It can be very broad discovery. You have to bring in, if you don't have a system in place, like an e-discovery system, and you haven't been through it before, you just need to reach out to the CTO to ask them, is this how this part of the platform works? And they have to think about it. And it takes time out of their day. They might need to get deposed. And then, how do you deal with that? They've never done that before. And across all the teams, starting with legal and then extending out. And if you're in another company, especially extending out to like the product and engineering teams, marketing, even finance. Yeah, it becomes an all-encompassing thing that everybody is working on together. It is like the launch of a new business line or something.
How have you said your team became a crack team of litigators. You're encouraging AI, you're telling people to embrace the new. How do you do it? And how do you find and hire people that are willing to make change and to be open to new things, challenge the status quo? Because I think if lawyers are kind of afraid of AI, the meta point would be more, or a meta point that I might see there is that it's more just like they've had this great career, they're making good money. There's kind of like not a reason to do things in a different way. And so, how do you suss that out, the kind of psychology of it? And how do you encourage and grow it in your team?
I think it's a push. Even if you're not a lawyer, but you work in the legal profession, I think those same sorts of ideas in training, you get exposed to it too, and that shapes the way you act and the way you think. Uh, as one example, we have on my team, we have an AI champion. She's our legal ops manager. So one of the things I told her, which kind of got her out of her comfort zone, was every week I want you to walk me through a tool that you created, like an AI tool. And I don't just mean a prompt that, just that's nice, it generates a good output. Like I'm talking about something that people can use to self-help, or you can use to self-help, that's built on our knowledge base. Say, going back to the litigation example, one thing that was very time consuming and very, very hard to do was like bringing a new, so let's say you get sued in a new jurisdiction. Well, you want to maintain consistency with the arguments that you've made, the way you describe your business. And so, we would have to go back through just hundreds of litigation documents that we filed to try to find that one little passage where we may have described something or made an argument in a certain way that we thought was really good. And we want to like pass that on to this new counsel, get them up to speed, spending as little money as possible doing that. Before AI, you had to
It's
keep,
a needle in a haystack for sure.
yeah.
Yeah, and I even think I think back to pre-AI. The thing that's jumping out at me was Meta about maybe 5 or 10 years ago posted a job role in legal, and they called it, this title was crazy. We can look it up in the show notes or something, but they called it the VP of Existing Obligations. I was like, "Oh my
That sounds
gosh."
about
It was
right. Yeah.
literally like going through and looking. Of course, Meta had the FTC consent decree. I'm sure they had a lot of state AGs that they were dealing with, hundreds of things globally. So you can literally imagine, like, what have we promised to what regulator? And this person was a VP. They hired somebody and they failed within 6 months, which is like, kind of sad, but predictable. But you can imagine, like, okay, at Amazon, there was another case where Amazon was arguing for purposes of going after an employee for their trade secret that the handbook was not a contract. And then in a case literally like 3 months later, argued that the handbook was a contract for purposes of the person violating it. So very clear conflict, to your point. So have you solved that problem? Does AI solve this problem?
Yeah. One of the things that we've been doing is building a knowledge base around like all of our court filings that we've done. So they can be like affidavits, declarations, even deposition transcripts. That's the greatest thing about this. Like, you would never look at a deposition transcript for something, or look for you know, you may just focus on your briefs, like the big briefs that you filed. But here you can really put it all in and create this excellent knowledge base that's comprehensive, and then you can just interact with it like it's like a person. And so, like, we have put all of these court filings in and into these, just like into a Google Drive folder, really. And then you can also, of course, like some AI tools will have a projects folder. You can also put them in there. There's a lot of different ways to do it, but you can totally leverage this extensive, decades-long, multi-decades-long knowledge base and get the answers that you want and that you need without having somebody go and search through all of that stuff.
So it sounds like when that tool works well, what you're getting is a better result, right? Because presumably in my example, Amazon is not, saying one thing in one court, another thing in another. And then, of course, what are the litigants in both cases going to do? Take the other position. How does that improve your outcomes? Like, do you have any specific examples, or like, is this work that previously your team would have just said, don't mess around, don't look for this because it's going to take forever. But I remember in that one case, blah blah blah. Like, is it additive? Like, what I'm getting at is, like, I think what you said is, like, it's not just saving time. In this case, it's better outcome. Have you seen that specifically yet?
Yeah. Yeah. So a lot of what you're just describing would fall onto me because, I am the only one that really had the knowledge of what we said in a certain case in France and how that might apply to an argument that we're making in India. And I think it goes back to that idea of not, of trying to figure out what do I not need to be doing anymore and trying to build a system around that. So it would fall on me to try to make sure everything was consistent. And then I might spend 3 hours trying to figure that out and maybe not come to an actual answer on it. But now I can just not even do that. And I think it's important. It needs to be done because you don't want to get in a situation where you're contradicting yourself. But I don't have to do it anymore because I can just farm it out to the AI tool. And of course, you go back and check, you make sure that's actually what it's saying is true in the actual documents, but you never would have been able to locate those and find the exact passages without that sort of help.
So it's funny you say that, because I think one of the original vision for GCAI was actually that the GC, in this case, in Amazon's case, David Zapolsky, in the various jobs I've had, David Zapolsky's been at Amazon for 25 years, seen the company through, antitrust, labor and employment issues, expansion of the company's, market cap to almost $1 trillion, like all these things. And was one of the top 10 highest paid execs in the building, added tremendous value. And you think part of it is that institutional understanding of what is Amazon's risk approach. And so I'm like, if AI can do that, then it's like an AI GC. Now, obviously you still need him, but that's kind of where I think this is going. Do you see the same?
Yeah, I envision a legal function, maybe short as 5 years in the future, where, say, where you were the only one that could do something, or you were the only one that had the answers, and you were the GC, being able to decentralize that to people in your team. And I think we always have this sort of, this idea of delegation and self-help. I don't think those are new things, but the being, we have this tool now that we can use that's very, very beneficial to our profession, legal, and to actually bring that about, to really delegate things that only you could do, delegate that to other people on your team, and then create these self-help tools for people on other teams to to just kind of replace you as the person they had to ask before and wait because you're a bottleneck and you're expensive. Gives them an alternative. It's a lot cheaper for the company and a lot faster.
What is something that surprised you about this job or your tenure at Redbubble?
I think how important relationships are. I think I'm very lucky because I like getting to know people and building relationships. I get a warm feeling when I feel like I can trust somebody and they trust me, and so I really thrive on that. And I don't think I really realized how much I enjoyed that and the importance I placed on it until I had the job that I have now. And I look back on the relationships that I've built over the years, and all the people that have come and gone again, like CEOs and CFOs. I've been here a long time and seen many of them come and go, but building that relationship and trust with each of them and then seeing how that translates into a really great legal product for the company. Yeah, that's probably been the most surprising for me and things I've enjoyed the most.
Has your CEO or board or shareholders noticed that legal is a product and a good one?
I like to think so. Yeah. Yeah.
Any good stories there?
Yeah, I mean, we like, the litigation, I think the board has been pretty happy with the way that, we've managed that risk and managed all that litigation. Like reorganizing from like restructuring our company from what started out as Redbubble, just this one marketplace into a parent company that owns a group of companies. So that I think was required some special skills. And yeah, I think people have been pretty happy with the way that all that has progressed. And now we're in an M&A phase. I think in turnaround too. We want to try to get our stock price up and grow. And yeah, that's our current challenge that we're trying to overcome. And I think we're on track to do that.
In your time at Redbubble, you had kind of an up and a down, and it sounds like you're in a turnaround now. What's different about being a turnaround GC?
Um, I think you need to be very cost conscious in a way that you don't need to be when your company is growing 30% year over year, doubling every year, in a hot area where there's a bunch of money being flowing in. Yeah, being a cost center, you're not generating revenue, you're not helping to create profit directly. So cost becomes a real pressure. And so you wanna have the mindset of, so what we have on our team, we have three values that all of us try to live by. And it's light touch, no surprises, and make every dollar count. We actually had that before we were in a turnaround situation, but you know, really we keep trying to add things to that list of three, but we keep going back to, actually, that list of three is pretty much everything. Everything kind of goes back to it, and so we've really stuck with that over the years. And in a turnaround, I think what is so important is the make every dollar count for the legal function, because you can have a direct impact on OpEx, which does impact profits. It's hard to make your business grow just from the legal function. Of course, that's impossible. Can't do that. You can make it not grow, which would be bad, but you do have a direct impact on OpEx and spend.
So light touch, make every dollar count, and what was the third one? Sorry.
No surprises.
No surprises. I love that. Okay, so literally, like, print this put it on a post-it and learn it. So no surprises. That's a good one. Ever been burned on that one, or where did it come from?
Yeah. Yeah, it's like what you don't want as a board, as a member of the board of directors, to be surprised by something. You want to make sure that, especially in the risk management area, that I'm not responsible for all the risks. I can't control all of them, but what I can do is make sure that, because we're responsible for the risk management function, that the board is informed and they can ask the questions that they need to ask. So that really gets to the no surprises thing. And I don't think we've been burned on anything there. These values have really always been a part of our DNA. I think it's more of just a fear of it happening. Yeah. So
It's good. I mean, it definitely is, like, it's, I think for me, we've had, as GCAI has grown, I had a bad day. It happens, but I had a bad day last quarter where, for about, let's say, half the day, I thought we didn't have insurance. Like, I thought something had not been submitted. It was like one of these, just like, oh God. And we ended up calling, the broker, and it turned out it was something with, ironically, their online portal wasn't showing the coverage, even though we had it.
yeah.
But something similar happened, not on insurance, more recently. And my faith, I was like, you know what? I'm sure it's fine. I'm sure we actually have whatever it is. And it turned out that we did. And so it was one of these, like, it was very like a Zen moment for me. But the difference between those two times was actually that the first time we didn't have a GC, and now we do. And so actually that was a nice realization, given what we do here at GCAI. All right, that was fun. So let's do the lightning round. So any thing that you would tell your early career self about succeeding as a GC, or just about life?
I think, don't be afraid of imperfection. Don't be afraid of making mistakes, especially me as a junior lawyer. Emphasize the output more than the amount of time you're spending on it. And then the third thing I think is maybe a little more abstract, but very relevant to what we're talking about here is always try to rely on a system and build a system and continuously improve your system. It makes decision making so much easier and consistent. It makes you less likely to leave things out. I think it really does, and it makes it so much less stressful because you don't feel like you're starting from scratch every time. You're kind of reverting back to this framework that has worked before that you're just executing.
I love it. What's a book, concept, or podcast that has shaped how you think?
I'm big into sci-fi. I really like that, but I will choose a non-sci-fi book. What's really shaped me as a lawyer and an executive and manager and leader is this book by Peter Drucker. I think everyone's heard of The Effective Executive. It's just one of the classics of management. It
Yes.
has so many insights. It's the effective executive in action. It's a workbook that accompanies that book. And Peter Drucker wrote it also, but it's like a kid's workbook that you would like fill out in kindergarten, but you're an executive, like actually writing out, like fill in the blanks and doing exercises from it. And it forces you to apply these things to your actual life and career. And so that's had a huge impact on me. I still actually do exercises from it to this day. It's been years.
Love that. Favorite thing about being a lawyer?
I think the relationships. I wish I could say I would always know the answers to things and like off the top of my head and be able to like help friends out with advice or when the CEO asked me or the chair of the board asked me or CMO, whoever, I have the answers and I'm right. Um, uh, I never really achieved that. And I think it's impossible. Yeah. Just being relied on and trusted and being able to help them and help the company. I think that's the greatest thing.
Anything else that you want our listeners to know about you or parting advice?
No, just let's embrace this new technology and make our lives easier and let's make our companies perform better. And I think we can do that by just kind of re-examining the way that we do our work and how we think about it and where we place our value.
I love it. Awesome. Jimmy, this is fun to catch up. I'm so glad you came on.
Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it.
That was Jimmy Toy, Chief Legal Officer at Articore Group, the company behind Redbubble and TeePublic. If you want to see how legal teams are using AI to do better work and move to the future Jimmy describes, head over to gc.ai. Follow Susie and Friends wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.